Hey, this is Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man, and you're watching John the Ninja.
Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? John the Ninja live in the dojo, aka the dojo, aka the John the Ninja Studios. And again, how fortunate, how blessed I have been to speak with so many great individuals. But truly, this is the first time the adrenaline is pumping. I had to do push-ups prior to. At every single walk of life I have entered, this man has conquered it. He's in charge of it, and he is seen as simply the greatest. Let me tell you a little bit about the individual I have with me. And again, I say he is the godfather of MMA. This man is from Macon, Georgia, and has lived a tough life, having to grow up the hard way. Mom was a go-go dancer, family was struggling, and he had to fight. At the age of 10, he was stabbed already. Ari was in police custody, and no one really knew what was going to become of him, being that he has such aggression and anger. But thanks to the love and care of Bob Shamrock, who took him into his boys' home and showed him the right way, how to use that aggression, pretty much he set him on the path to make history. The man I'm with today is Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock's accolades are way too numerous to even mention, but some that you have to know regardless if you're a fan or not. He is an All-American collegiate football player. He actually participated in the 88 Olympics trials, at least, and the man is seen as one of the greatest MMA and professional wrestlers of all time. He's done it with the greats. You name it in wrestling, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, The Rock. You name it in fighting, Suzuki, Funaki, Tito Ortiz. And he set the groundwork with the Gracies to make MMA what it is today. Ladies and gentlemen, here to talk about Valor BK, his new promotion, and his life story and how God has blessed him. I give to you, Ken Shamrock. Good sir, how are you?
Good, man. Thank you for that introduction. That was kind.
And it's simply just mind-boggling how many things you've done, and I can only imagine you trying to sit there when you're asked questions like, "Hey, how did it feel with this?" I'm like, "Well, that was which one?" It happened so many times, but again, just truly honored. I've done professional wrestling, I've done martial arts, I've been on all these avenues, and no matter where I go, you're always the name that they mention. So, sir, first things first, I gotta say, I love your podcast, my man. I absolutely love the stories you're spitting. These are stories that, you know what, you wouldn't necessarily hear from the normal interviews. My favorite one is still that one time where you and your buddy, your dad gave you the car, you were going to go out to the town, just relax, and somehow you just ended up tailing your ex-girlfriend, and the guy in the car wanted to fight, and you knocked him out. So, when you prepare for the podcast, you've done some preaching, you know how to do promos. How do you prep for those? Do you do it like if it's something that, hey, I gotta write this down, I want to hit these bullet points, or can you just go off the top of the head because the memories are still so vivid?
Yeah, everything that I do is just right off the cuff because I'm not that kind of guy that can prepare for speeches, even motivational speaking or any of the stuff that I do. I don't prepare for it because it's my life. And so that's just basically how I talk to people is straight up real, what I went through, how I recovered, the people that helped me. And you can do it too. So it's just real. It's not choreographed. It's not rehearsed. It's not entertainment. It's the real thing. And so for me, like I said, when I go on and I talk about anything in my career, whether it be fighting, whether it be working in group homes, whether it just be me, it's all stories that I literally lived.
How you're able to convey the story, I think, is where the strong suit of that podcast comes out. It's so personable. It is like you're actually in the room, and people say that all the time. Oh, like, it's like they're talking to you. But having done this format, especially in radio, the idea is to convey that you're in the room with the person. You do that so eloquently. And, thinking back to your upbringing, I want to hit early, the only other person I can remember from Macon, Georgia is Little Richard, and he did good himself too. But, we get the usual parts of, like, your mom was struggling, there was abuse in the family. You were really in I want to say a ghetto, more so of African Americans, because when I hear your story, I automatically sympathize with the thinking, and, like, I understand this culture. So the change is when you got baptized at 10, at least for a little bit. And it just seemed like such a random point. You guys are in California, your mom's starting to go to church, and you're like, I just want to get out the house. And you had this moment where you basically asking them. It's like, yeah, I'll help with the Christian, whatever. Give me some free gum. But then you have this peace of mind, this calmness. Could you walk us through? Because I know what you're talking about, but not everybody else will understand that, how random it was and how it really set the stage. Because, you know, you opened up, you got baptized, but right after that, like 4 weeks later, it's like, hey, same song and dance, out here robbing and stealing and fighting.
It's difficult, I think, for people to understand that moment because, yeah, they would look at it in a sense and not understanding all of the elements that surrounded that situation. I just got out of juvenile hall. I was just brought home to a home that was just violent. I ran from there. I lived on the street. I didn't want to be there. It was a lot of things wrong. But I went back there because the juvenile hall was full. So they put me there because I had failed one home. So I go into as I go in, the surrounding situation is this, is that my mind, I'm not there. I don't want to be there, but I'd rather be there than somewhere else, right? So this is where I'm at for now. I ended up always making choices in that moment that I would put me in more of a comfortable situation for me, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, but for me. So being there, when she decided that she wanted to go to church, and I saw all the thing happening with her crying, and it didn't make sense to me. Why are you crying if you're happy? Normally you're crying, there's stuff going on, and you're not happy, obviously, but this was different. But I didn't understand. I was like, she's, then invited me to go to church, which is trying to get away from the house. I didn't want to be around. So I go down there. Now, understand this, and this is something I don't explain in my talks. I brush over it. But understand that this is a neighborhood that I grew up in, that me and my brothers and some of the few other kids would rob, steal, and beat people up. We weren't good. And so everybody in this neighborhood knew who we were. This was a neighborhood church. So going to this church, everybody knew who I was. So it wasn't like I was going in and these people were just going, oh, we don't know him. We'll invite him in. We'll take him under our wing. We'll be nice to him. No, these people knew who I was. A lot of these kids I beat up. The parents, we robbed their houses or broke into their cars, stole their rims, whatever it was. We had bad reputations. And for me to walk into this church and then go into the kids' room and be accepted, not by the kids, but by the body of the church, and to be made welcome, even though most of them were afraid of me. And then to walk down a street with these same people, holding a box of gum, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense the kind of kid I was, the direction I was going, where I was going, my thought process. It doesn't make sense. I look back on that whole situation that happened, and the only way that that ever could have been possible was because the Lord intervened. It had to be, because there's no way I'm going to church. No way. But I go because it's a way out. There's no way I'm walking with these goody two shoes and holding gum for them as they walk up to these doors that I robbed, these houses, some of these houses that I robbed, and start offering these things. Think about that scenario. It just, you think about that prior to, and you're like, that's crazy. That'll never happen. But it happened. And because it happened, my life had been changed forever, because it was this unconscious desire to find that feeling that I felt when I stepped off that curb.
I love how you beautifully, eloquently spoke in another interview, especially when you were preaching about that peace of mind. You can't replicate that. That's like the adrenaline rush. You can't replicate the adrenaline rush, but we're pushing on now. So it's back to the same song and dance. Robbing, stealing, you're not home. You're living in a car. You finally get caught. And after all these homes, you finally get to Mr. Shamrock's, Bob Shamrock, who's helped over 600 boys. The man would get every 18-year-old a new car, so if they wanted to go out or do business or go to work, they had the opportunity to. And he just showed you guys a level of love that you weren't familiar with. The house was great. He really worried about you guys. I remember he sat you down. It's like, man, listen, your problem is fighting. So if you fight, you're gonna be digging a pool in the bag. I'm sitting here like, a pool? Wait a minute. So one thing that caught me off guard is you were so reserved from physical touch, from the abuse of people in the nightlife, and trying to protect yourself, because again, sympathizing with the environment you grew up in, you got to be careful. Somebody walks up to you 5 people deep or around you, You have to be prepared to fight. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's gonna happen. So what caught me off guard is the amount of trust you placed in him. And I was wondering, when did you actually allow him to embrace you and give you that hug? That first time where you're like, you know what, I trust this man, I'm gonna give it a shot, and then you actually allowed him to give you that loving hug that everyone usually needs when they're younger.
Yeah, it didn't happen, and even all the way up until probably I got married and started having kids, I was ever comfortable with it. But it was, I think that because he knew my file and he'd kind of seen things that had gone on throughout my childhood, I think that not think, I know he knew and understood some of the boundaries and some of the feeling that he was getting from me, because he could hug other kids, but with me, you know, I would always veer away from anything. Anytime any debt started, I'd walk away, or, I wouldn't allow it to happen. I push people away. Don't touch me. Um, so I think over a gradual of time, I think probably a year, 6 months to a year, there might have been a hug in there somewhere, but it wasn't mutual. It was kind of like, hey, kind of something like that. Because you see it every single day in this house with these 18 boys, 20 boys, and it's constantly going on around you, hugging one another, hugging Bob, hugging Didi, hugging the cook. There was all that was going on because it was natural. So for me, I just seen it all happening around me, not paying attention to it. And it just became like something normal. But it never was a point where I ever kind of reached and hugged anybody else. I couldn't pinpoint it because, like I said, it wasn't anything that was explosive or a breakthrough, because it constantly happened all the time in the house. And I'm sure there were times where even when I won a match, wrestling match, it was a hug. Hey, good job. So when it came to the actual one-on-one, you're standing there, it's an emotional moment, and you hug somebody, it didn't go like that. It was more a way of life, and it just gradually started to happen. I remember him hugging me all the time in high school after we had gotten past that part of me being uncomfortable with it. But he would always say to me, and it bothered him for a long time, that I never really hugged him back. Like I never really initiated hugs. And I know he mentioned that probably, I don't know, I was 17 or 18 years old. He mentioned it to me that, you know, how it's like, why am I always coming to you and giving you hugs? And always, he says, sometimes I need a hug too. And I remember going up to him, just hugging him, like, oh, okay, I'll give you a hug. And I picked him up off the ground and just squeezed him, right? And just because I was big and strong for a 17, 18-year-old kid. And he was like, whoa. And I said, there's your hug. So for me, it was never, I always had a problem with anything that was more of an emotional hug or more of a love hug. Because for me, for so long, it was just not, it was just wrong. Those things just didn't happen. So it had been a while, but um, it was probably 8, 19, 20 years old. Um, it started to get better, but it wasn't until I got married and I had my kids that I started hugging them. I hug them every day. My second oldest boy was a lot like me when it comes to hugs. Like he didn't like to be hugged. And I would hug him anyways. It would bother him around his friends. And there was nothing wrong with that, but you're just like, come on, dude, stop. It's like, okay, okay. But I didn't understand what my dad had felt like because I would never initiate a hug until I had my own kids. And of course, then I started hugging my dad more as I had kids. And so I was able to really start to understand that. But going through what I went through, and some of the stuff that life throws at you, the distrust, the anger, the frustration, it doesn't, at least for me, it hug was never something I wanted to do. And for a very long time, until, like I said, I got married, to where it became okay and natural, and I understood what it was to hug and love. But as a teenager, even after I got past all of that, the hugs to me still was almost off out of bounds for me to hug another male. I always thought in my head it was the wrong thing, the wrong message. Even hugging a girl who you don't know, or even littler, younger girl. Just I'm not comfortable with that. And a lot of that has to do because of the barriers that I had set for myself when I was a kid. Even today, um, I won't put myself in a position when it comes to a young girl to be in a room or drive them home. If one of the kids or girls or whatever wants to, because even when I was a father, we had four teenage girls and three teenage boys. I would never drive the girls home ever by myself. It either had to be my daughter with me or my sons and their girl. I would never be in a car with them by myself. And I know it's stupid, right? I mean, like, it's nothing going to happen with me, but it's just the idea in my mind that what I had gone through and what I understood, I didn't want to ever be put in a position to where that could be thought of me. So I have those defenses in me and are always going to be there.
It's a difficult subject for people to bring up, and then to know, like, hey, even the greatest of all time went through a difficult situation like that. And back to your father, to have you and your brother actually be adopted. If I was a parent, hey, I've been watching these kids, I love these kids, but for them to go, I want your name, I'm gonna solidify. It's basically a legal baptism. I am your child. That is something that, for a parent, that's just over the moon. Like, I can't imagine how great he felt. But at the time you did it, you were about 18, 19 area. What was that decision like? Like, did you go, hey, Dad, listen, I've been thinking about this for a while. I want you to adopt me? Or was it always something he offered and you guys just happened to be the ones that took him up on it? Because 200 guys coming to a funeral, all of them successful, you know, that's a huge impact.
It was already done. By the time I was 16, 17 years old, he had already mentioned he wanted to adopt me. And, to me, that was because, as far as I was concerned, I was already his son, right? I mean, like, he kept me on. I wasn't a ward of the court anymore. He was raising me. I was his son. Um, it was just the name that was different. And I know my biological mother um, didn't want to sign papers because he had actually approached her and wanted to adopt me and not to take her as away from as my mother, but to take his name so that he's able to support me, to be able to get the benefits, everything I needed as a son from a father that she couldn't provide for me. And at first, I remember she saying yes, but then she came back and said no. I don't know the whole situation. She's passed away since, but I don't know the thoughts and the reasons why she said no. She would never say. She just just said no, and I didn't understand it because he was the one taking care of me, and she should have been happy for me because I wasn't going down the same path my other two brothers went, which prison, right? I mean, um, they did not. I mean, they're doing better now, obviously, but they had a rough go. And I had somebody there that was literally ready to take me and already put me through school. I was getting good grades. I was an athlete. I was going to college. I had scholarships my senior year. I had everything. And she just decided she didn't want it to happen. And I was very angry at that because I couldn't figure out why she would stop me from wanting to have a good life and seeing the success that I was having, and then not allowing me to have that. It was frustrating. And I remember telling her, I'm going to get it done when I turn 18 anyways. And so it was something that I had already known and that it was already been living out. But when I turned 18 years old, because even as my senior year, when I played in my senior game, when it was parents' night, my mom had come. Of course, Bob Shamrock was there, and I was introduced as Kenneth Wayne Shamrock Kilpatrick or Shamrock Nance. I don't remember which one it was because I had two of those last names. I don't remember which one stuck. So I had already taken my father's name, even though I wasn't adopted yet. And so As soon as I turned 18 years old, went down, got the paper signed, and I was officially adopted. So it wasn't something that we had done, and all of a sudden it was official, and we set a party for it. It was already that way before we ever even signed the papers. I was already his son and already living that life. As far as I was concerned, that was just a piece of paper that would actually make it, I guess, official in the world we live in. So it wasn't a major um, impact as far as I was concerned. I know for my father it was because he had a paper, right? I mean, it's my son. But for me, it was like it was already done. Like the minute I accepted him, the minute that I allowed him to be in my life, to be my father, because I had to allow him. I had to let him. And once I did that, and that was when I was 17 years old, I knew that this is who my father was. And when he came to me and approached me about adopting me, I was excited. I was like, hell yes. Like, I mean, I already knew it, right? I already knew this is what it was, but him to say that to me was like that was it. And so once we did the paperwork, that was already I was already living as his son.
I really want to talk about your mom. She ends up being super pivotal down the road when the career's kind of on the slower go, doors aren't opening, and God's calling you back to, hey, let's get you back into the church, let's get you studying. She becomes very pivotal. But prior to that, we don't hear too much about mom. Didi has a story where one of the kids, they drew like a very graphic kill everybody picture. Teachers are freaking out, send her home. She looks at us like, you know what, that's actually pretty good. You can actually do an add-on and help us out here. So let's keep this going. You could do this too, but let's get that add-on. And to be able to see that, that's the chemistry they had as a team, Bob and Didi, to help these kids. What was your relationship with mom like prior to, coming back to God after all the fighting and the success? How was that growing up?
The hard part was with marriages, we never know what goes on behind closed doors with married people. And my father was a great human being, but he had his downfalls, just like all of us were human beings. And my mom, which I didn't know at the time, was suffering from those downfalls. And we nobody ever knew it because outside of that door, they were perfect. They would speak to one another politely. They dressed nicely. They were put together. They respected one another. But there was something going on behind the door. And it was very difficult because when my mother ended up separating from my father, I had the relationship with my dad. And I, I mean, Didi was there, but she wasn't really there, like in that moment. And a lot of it had to do was because I think my dad paid more attention to the kids and spent all of his time and effort and emotion on helping these kids that he had none left for her. And so a lot of things went on, and she ended up leaving. They separated. That was devastating because we thought the home would be shut down. They were going to pull the boys out. And so it was a mess. And so I was angry. I was frustrated. I hated her, but I didn't know everything that went on. And it was something that if I would have known at that time, I would have ran far away from my father because for me, that's what I would have been afraid of. And my father, and again, he never came out and said it, but I think most people know it. And my mom had confirmed it after we had gotten back together, that he was gay. And but he was a Christian and he was fighting it his whole life, but he had his falls, right? So, and in my mind, when all of that happened, I was really angry, frustrated, and didn't understand what our relationship was. I was like, what was it? Because he spent so much time with me, and he put so much effort into me and my brother Frank and all the other kids, but more for us. But yet I didn't know the secret that he had, right? And he didn't mess with, like I say, he didn't mess with the boys. None of that stuff was there, right? But he had his own life, and he would live that out when he would go on his trips, and he would stay away for a week. He would go do whatever he was doing. But when I got back with my mom, she had confirmed that, he was going to some other places in San Francisco and other places, and he wasn't spending time with her, and all of this stuff started to to infect her, right, and their relationship. But none of us knew there was a problem. None of the counselors, nobody, kids, nobody saw it on them. So whatever they did, they kept it away from us, behind us, and in behind closed doors, because the home was running really good. Kids were being treated well. Everything was working well. But then my mom ended up leaving, and it crushed us. And everybody was mad, and nobody knew why. And I hated her for a long time because I thought she left him for someone else. And come to find out, that wasn't the case. That my father, who I love very much, and who without him I would not be where I'm at. He saved my life. He gave me a life, and he loved me like his own son. And so I had a life because of that. So being able to kind of balance that and understand everything that went on, and sitting down with my mom now, who I have a really, really close relationship with now, and having an understanding of the frustration that she was going through, and the struggles that she had, because here she was, a young woman, and not being able to get the affection that she needed as a young woman. And so I started to understand that. I remember when we called her, me and my wife, because my father was passing away, and we brought him home on respite, because he just didn't want to be living on life support and all the other stuff that he had going on, that he had to stay in the hospital, because he was in there for almost 2.5 years in the hospital. And he just said, I'm done. And so he made that choice. So we brought him home. And so one of the first things that we did was put a call into, because I know that my dad loved her. That was his first love, right? And all the things that transpired after that, I don't know. I don't have clarity on it. But I do know that he loved her, and that it hurt him when she left. Now, how all that fits into his lifestyle, I don't know. But I do know that that was one of the things that he asked for, was to be able to talk to her, and to be able to, say sorry. So we called her, I remember, and we hadn't talked to her in, you know, 8, 9 years. And so I didn't know where to get a hold of her. Finally got a hold of her, and it was she was very kind, especially with me not knowing everything. I didn't know everything, and I was very angry at her. And so I remember talking with her and asking her to come, up, and that if you could talk to him, and she did. She ended up grabbing the phone and prayed with him, and forgave him, forgave each other. And so it was a uh, one of those moments when you're sitting there going, like, you're just okay. Like, now you feel like everything's in place. Like, he can literally go where he needs to go. So it was a good moment. But on top of that, see, she was working at churches and working in things, and she'd been remarried, and she offered to come up, and because she's a great singer, and that was one of the things that he loved, was her playing the piano and singing. So she offered to drive through a storm that day and come up to the funeral and play the piano at his funeral. And so I thought that that was something that was pretty special. And but of course, in her own mind, she needed that too, not just him, but she did also, because she had done things wrong even in that situation. Um, so it was really a good thing that they were able to do that. And again, when I tell you about these stories and how they happen, it's not man-made. It can't be. These are things that just happen because God intervenes and allows them to happen. And so she came up, played the piano. I got to get to know her. I would have never known any of this if I hadn't have been connected with her, and be able to have my relationship with my mother now, who was in the middle behind. She knew everything that went on, and I didn't. And so I was truly able to understand that, and why things happened the way they happened. And I also understand where my father was coming from, because because I can't even imagine marrying somebody and in the middle of your marriage, and maybe not even the middle of your marriage, maybe those were already there and he was trying to live as a good Christian and he was trying to make things and force himself to be a good Christian. And it just didn't work. Like those urges and those things that tend to be his thing kept pulling him away from that marriage and relationship and not being able to do his husband duty and being able to put her in that position. I can only imagine when you think about both sides of that. It's easy to blame one or the other and take a side. But if you look at it, man, it's a situation in which who's who's really who's really at fault? I mean, do you tell a guy, "Oh, sorry, but if you got those, you just what do you do?" Like I had a hard time my whole life, even to this day, of knowing what the right thing is in that moment.
But again, a testament to how strongly committed they were to you guys. You know, that's it. No matter how you slice it, that's a tough deal for both mom and dad. And to see the prosperity that they gave them, the sacrifice that they did, you know, it makes me think of like how lucky you were to do not the same sacrifice, you know, but you came up to a situation, you're fighting. UFC can't hold you down on what was promised. You know, they paid what they paid, but they can't pay the lavish lifestyle you've created for other people with Lions Den, the home you had. So you went to WWE. But before we get to that, you know, now that we're on the subject of God, a big question I always ask is how does God talk to you? Because with everything you've done, you know what it's like to be with the rich and famous. You ask for it, you get it, it's happening. You either do it or you don't do it. Some people are stronger in their will or not, Christian or not. You're gonna get bad people, you're gonna get good people. But to know when God is pushing you in a direction is so difficult for people. For me, most of the time it's like a random thought and that
Right.
somehow feels validated, and then you're thinking like, I'm just overthinking this is stupid, this is crazy, you know. But and some of the best decisions I've made, life altering, allowing me to speak to you today, was off of a go to this school. God, that's where Scotty's going to school. I don't want to go there. I'm a Christian, but he the type of Christian I'm not, you know. So how did you know you were getting that feeling like, hey Ken, these doors are closing because I need you to hunker down, study the Bible? And then when you asked your wife, like, honey, I don't know how to tell you this, God wants me to go. She goes, I know. I'm like, yo, hey, how did you know? Like, so how does God talk to you? And when you went, what did you learn from that time where you took away and just studied the Bible?
After the thing we just talked about with the struggles with my parents, got a relationship with my mother. My career was kind of still towards the, I guess, the tail end of it. I had a couple fights at the end. I was losing. Didn't have the same experience in the ring that I was experiencing early when I felt healthy and strong and quick. And so I had to start thinking about, what am I going to do? Those thoughts start coming into your head. And, I, by having that relationship with my mother, we would go to their church. Pastor Verna was the pastor at that time. She's now a pastor at another Soul Harvest in Modesto, and we go there when we go down to visit. But when I started going to those churches, it felt like my mom was one of those ones that was constantly in the Bible. She studied in the morning, she studied at night. I felt like the Holy Spirit lived in her house. I mean, it just felt that good. It just felt like she was just constantly connected. And I remember looking at it going, is that what it is? Like, is that what I'm supposed to be doing? It's like, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I don't feel that way. I don't connect that way. And I remember talking to her and she's saying everybody connects differently. She said that, there's times where you need to take moments or hours to really just be in the spirit so that you understand what it is that's happening in the world and in your life, because most people are constantly moving and on the go, and they take a moment to stop and go to church, but they're focused on somebody else or some other message or this or that. Says, but really take that moment to really just soak, let that feeling come in where there's no distraction and it's just you and God. And you don't even have to say anything, but just be there and allow that word to be heard. because you're not focusing on it. You're not trying to push a message or to receive a message. You're just there because you want to know. Just know everything. Don't look for anything. Just be there. And I remember thinking to myself, I've never kind of done that. And I remember every single day as I was traveling, I was doing different events, I would always talk to God like I'm talking to you without having, a conversation out loud, but in my head, like you know, just conversation. And I would do that constantly. And I remember when my mom had said that, I was thinking to myself, how do I do that? And I remember the Lord, like I was literally sitting in bed with my wife. And I remembered it was this thing that just come over me. And it had been going on for a while where I just knew that I felt like I was being pulled with this new thing that had just entered my life, which was my mother, right? And we'd already visited a few times. And like I said, it just felt like I was being pulled there. Like, and I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to, I can't leave my house. I can't leave my wife and I can't move. And I remember thinking, it kept coming to me like, you go there, you go there. And I remember laying in bed and just telling my wife, and my wife's very, she pays attention to me. Like she sees when things are not, something bother me or something's not going right. She goes, well, what's wrong with you today? Just the other day, she says, what's wrong with you? And I was like, what are you talking about? She says, I was just like, so she, how they notice.
They just got a second sense. I don't know how.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of what it was, is that she just knew that spiritually, because we had talked too about, maybe I need to go out and do ministry. Maybe I should be out, telling my story. We had conversations, and I remember sitting up in bed and I remember telling her, as she's sitting there, she goes, I go, man, I said, I don't know, this is gonna sound weird. It says, but man, I just feel like the Lord's pulling me up that I got to go stay at my mom's by myself for a while to try to figure out what it is I got to do. I don't know what it is. I feel like I need to. And I remember she just said, I know. I was like, and I remember thinking to myself when I was thinking about that with God, when I was thinking about I was going to go up there, it's like, you want me to tell my wife that I'm going to go stay down there and I don't have a time frame without her? I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, dude, and I've been through this a few times with other things that I did with being able to forgive other people. I went through the same process where I was questioning God's thing. Like, hey, dude, how is this gonna happen? Like, and when they happen, you're feeling stupid. Like, well, if God asks you to do that, He's already got it laid out for you, right? And if He doesn't have it laid out, there's a reason why it isn't laid out there, because maybe there's something more you have to do. There's always a reason and a purpose, right? And sometimes we don't like it. Sometimes it works out perfect and we feel stupid and going, wow, yeah, I get it. And that's the way it was with this, whereas I literally told her and she said she knows. Like, I get it. Like, it wasn't, and I remember going down there, and I think that was probably the first time where I remember when I went down there, and my wife, we came down with me, and we set everything up, and I was going to be staying. I had no time frame. And I remember I was in the room, and I remember going to sleep every night, and I remember praying, and I remember doing what she was doing, like literally spending moments, an hour, half hour, just being, and not looking for a purpose, not asking for anything, but just kind of just sitting there and trying to take it in and just listen. And it was probably about 2 or 3 days into this, where it was probably the first time where I truly understood and knew without a shadow of a doubt that God was talking to me. Like I was literally understanding my vision and where I had to go. And that's where that forgiveness and everything came in, where I had to reach out to three individuals, and there was more, but there was basically three.
If I'm correct, those three were Tito Ortiz, Dana White, and your brother. There's
Yes.
there's a quote you stated, and it was, "Ask for forgiveness. You're held accountable by God to take charge," and they were intertwined. But having been I've had situations where it literally was not my fault. I had such a really big life altering opportunity. It got screwed up, and I'm the one that has to apologize. And looking at your situations, especially with Tito, I understand you guys are fighters, talk trash. He was talking trash afterwards, and some other stuff happened. I can kind of understand that we're fighters. That's what we do. Okay, you have to have an attitude of a certain way. His just went too far. Dana, you didn't know the situation he had with the other fighting promotion when you not trying to go into business for yourself, but just trying to take care of your fighters and see an opportunity. And things get ruffled. You're like, I can't understand why this would be a bad thing. You're not really taking the time, and then of course your brother with the situation with your father passing, and he just wasn't able to reconcile. Hey, I can see him after what happened. You know, when you apologized, everything was smoothed out. Tito was like, yeah, no problem, man. Dana, no problem. Now you and your brother have this relationship in restoration or restored. But what was the lesson for you to apologize? Was it more God saying, like, hey, if you reach out first, you'll be able to keep going forward? Just so they would have the opportunity to, even though it's their fault, God's giving them the way out through you saying, hey, I want to talk to you? Or was there something else that we're not seeing? What was the lesson you feel God had with that apology?
For me, I just felt like it was a way for me to be able to let go. Um, there was, as most people would see through those different things that happened, and it was definitely in front of fans, things that had happened. People understood there was issues. It just felt like for me that I was able to just let it go, be able to not have to have that anger or that um oh, I don't even know what to call it, but defense, being defensive, with every time those names get brought up, being defensive, being angry, being frustrated.
Adrenaline
uh,
pumping and
yeah, it just felt like being able to go and let go of that gave me freedom, gave me an option. And I didn't know that when I was doing it. But when it happened, it felt like when someone now would talk to me about those guys, I, I'm not defensive. I'm not frustrated or angry about them. I'm a lot easier to be able to speak with about those things. And I think that when when doing this, we all start thinking about, well, what why don't they apologize? Or I wasn't the only one in this thing that caught. But when these things happen, you have to understand that you're not necessarily doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself, because you have to be able to move on in life, whether it's a parent issue or divorce or kids fighting with one another or a friend or whatever it is. When you go and able to say, listen, I'm sorry for whatever I did, I'm asking for your forgiveness, you're not necessarily doing it for them. You're doing it so that you can make the situation better for yourself with them. And if they buy into it with you, then that's a plus, because now you're making that situation better for both of you. But if you don't go do that, you're going to carry that with you your whole life. And every time something's brought up that's similar to that, you're going to be defensive and you're going to be angry and you're going to be frustrated, because you're carrying that same situation with you from someone else. And so for me, it just felt, the lesson I learned from that was, you're not going out there and trying to fix the world. You got to start with yourself, and you got to fix yourself. And that you have to go out there and make sure that you go out in whatever situation or whatever things that you've been involved with in the past that are haunting you or that are bothering you, go fix them.
that's tough, especially when nowadays, especially with social media and everything, like everything is overthought. It's difficult to really act on impulse and not have to think like, hey, what could happen, and sometimes that can be a hindrance. Something that I feel must have been one of the most difficult situations for you, not just as a Christian man, but as a father, as a mentor, was the whole War Machine situation. And I don't want to go into too much detail about that. Everybody knows it's been documented. But now that he's serving life in prison, how do you go forward with that? Because obviously you stated, even for all the bad, there's good in there. It's just it's overshadowed by the issues. In this particular position, do you still have a feeling of like, hey, you know what, I want to reach out to him, I want to still, tell him about God, let him know? Or is it at a point where, you know what, I've done what I can, I need to step away and let God do that? Like, it's mind numbing, especially in the moment when it happened with the Mexico trip. Like, I'd been like, listen, God is God, but sometimes things got to get done.
Right.
So how did you deal with that, and where are you at with that now in the situation as far as forgiving and dealing with
Yeah.
it as a Christian?
I think most people have to understand, and this is where I think people misunderstand being a Christian. That doesn't mean you don't go out and be able to kick someone's ass. It doesn't, because you look at the Bible. The Bible has got stuff all the way through it. Christ himself went in and flipped tables, and you know, I mean, you go through the Bible. If you read the Bible, you'll see that it's blood. It's bloody. It's vicious, but it's loving and it's caring. And I think that that's what we are as Christians, is that I think people kind of look at Christian as being all lovey dovey and this. Trust me, brother, I am not lovey dovey. If you cross me and you threaten my family or do something of that nature, I'm going to fight you and I'm going to hurt you. And then I'm going to give you a hug and forgive you. But in that moment, don't think for a second that Christian brothers and sisters should not stand up for themselves, because that's not true. And that's what it was with John. It was just more about he was affecting one of my kids, and that you know things had to be done. And unfortunately for me, I didn't get to put my hands on him, and I'm glad. Um, but I don't hate John. I think John has gone through a lot of misfortunes early on in his life, and I became friends with him. I trained him. I saw the good in him, and it's still there. But he made bad choices, bad decisions that caused him to end up where he's at. And I don't hate the guy, and I don't dislike the guy. In fact, is I feel bad for him because I know who he could have been, and he made a bad choice.
Truly, you're at a point of like, I don't want to say mastery of Christianity. We never master it, but to be there, to be able to think about it clearly. They say hindsight's 2020, but to be at this spot and be like, still be able to articulate the feeling, it's truly marvelous. I don't deal with too many people that think on your scale. It's agreed. My God is a violent guy. We'll throw down. But I've seen so many families just years. They'll the stereotype for Spanish families. I haven't talked to my brother in 20 years. He's in the kitchen. But to get to the level where you're at, to think clearly about it, truly marvelous. With all your accomplishments, I'm a big wrestling fan. No Mercy, I didn't want to fight you, and then you would come into the Royal Rumble in that wrestling game, and I'm like, oh, Shamrock. The fighting world. I remember after all the stuff you did and finally came back, your first fight back was Kimbo Slice. I remember seeing that and watching in awe, seeing two great competitors. And, I think when I'm scaling back on your life, I think a really big moment that has to be recognized is when you came back from your first neck injury, when you started playing collegiate football. You had to go to the doc, sign it. I need you to sign this off. You're not even getting scholarships. You learned business. You broke your neck. Now you got the plague. And now you're a walk on to become a linebacker that's, hey, this is one of the nation's top players. Do you have a certain moment, a certain hit during a game or a play where you did the play and then it kind of clicked? I'm back. I overcame this neck injury.
This is where my dad saw me as someone just different, because after breaking my neck, and a lot of people when they say they break their neck, um, I don't ever see pictures. And when I do, they've got a neck roll on, or they're in a hospital bed, and then they're out in a couple weeks. I've got pictures that I put on the internet that I was in a halo where I had bolts in my head and a chest plate on, where I couldn't move my head unless my waist turned. Metal bracket. And I have pictures that I put on there so that people can kind of see that I'm not saying that I broke my neck and then I was in traction for, 3 days or a week or 6 weeks, and then I was let out of the hospital. I had a bone chip taken out of my hip and fused in my neck, so where the vertebrae and the cartilage were crushed. They fused it in there. So when I tell people that I break my neck, and then you hear other people say, "Well, I broke my neck and I went in and I wrestled and won a medal, or did played football like I did way back," but then you go, "That's not possible because I broke my neck." And if you broke your neck is going to be isolated for a long time, 6 months to a year for it to heal the broken bone. So when I hear people say that, I'm like, it kind of insults me because of the work that I had to put in to be able to get to where I was at, and then have somebody come and say, "Well, I broke my neck, and then I went out and I beat up 7 people." It's like, that's not the same thing. Breaking your neck literally means breaking your neck, like having paralysis and issues, and then having to be in the hospital and having something on your head, even when you get out of the hospital, not a neck brace, but bolts going into your head in a bracket that literally isolates the neck from moving at all. And that's what I was. And like I said, I put pictures up on my social media to be able to show people that, listen, when I tell you I broke my neck, I broke my neck. And to be able to do it in high school, not after I've had a career in boxing or fighting or wrestling, and then go out and have my name out there and have all the skill sets I need, and then damage my neck, and then come back in a recovery and do it again, which I did that also. But to be doing that after at 17 years old, breaking my neck, being in a halo where I had to wear for 8 months, 6 to 8, I don't remember the exact, but it was a while, to where I lost all control of my neck muscles because it wasn't moving. It was sitting there. When I went and got it taken off, my neck and my head would flop around. I couldn't balance it because it hadn't been used for 6 to 8 months, however long it was, for my head. I had to go into therapy to be able to balance and walk again, just as I did when they put the halo on. Because if you isolate the head, you don't allow the head to move, but to move with the hips, shoulders, neck, everything being one, and you turn, then when you turn a corner on a normal thing, you balance with your head. And you don't realize it until you don't have it anymore. So when they blocked my head off to my waist, I had to learn to walk because I was off balance. I didn't understand that head balanced that much. So I had to learn to walk all over again. Then when they took it off, 8 months down the road, they took it off. I had to go to rehabilitation again. I had to wear that one that most people wear, the rubber one, because my neck wasn't strong enough to be able to hold my head up. So then I had to learn to walk with that way, and to take it off an hour at a time to build up the muscles, to walk, to learn to walk again, to be able to learn how to balance again. Year and a half later, and this is what I'm trying to, for me, I think back on it, and to this day, I seriously don't know how, other than the Holy Spirit. I truly don't, because the situation I was in and the severity of that, and to me come back a year and a half later and play college football, lead the team in tackles, and be the defensive captain after breaking my neck. And of course, we know my career, what I did after that. But to me, I just look back on it and I was just going, but when you ask that question, when was I knew that I was back again? I couldn't tell you that, because and this is why I think my dad said I was different, was that I never once thought about that as being a hindrance or stopping me from doing anything. I never thought about it. That's how crazy it was. Like, I never thought of my neck breaking. I never thought of me being hurt or injured. I constantly kept training and getting bigger and stronger and more physical. When I would go out and play, I'd study the playbook. I would know what other teams were doing. Not one time, and as God is my witness, not one time did I ever think about my neck. When I hit somebody as hard as I could, the adrenaline that went through my body, I would get jacked up. I would just like, oh, I'd get screaming. I'd be so intense. But not one time did I ever think about my neck. I remember it wasn't until probably towards the end of my career when they started doing documentaries on me and they started asking more questions about where I came from, who I was. And I remember that my father at the time was the one that brought up me breaking my neck. And so when he brought it up, they were like, they laughed. And it was like, stop kidding. It's like, no, I did. I broke my neck. They're like, shut up. Like, no, I broke. And then we showed them the pictures. Like, I mean, it became crazy because I never thought about it. I never brought it up because it was never a part of me. It was never a thought in my head.
And your dad, especially when you were in the bed, he's like, listen, this can either make you or break you. God didn't take you this far just to leave you here. You know, I remember Master Eddie telling me something. This is one of my personal teachers. I was trying to break a board. I couldn't do it. I started to pray. He's like, listen, that's great. You can pray all you want, but you have to do the work. So I think that's more in a situation like that. That's a testament. Yes, God was helping you, the rehabilitation, but at the end of the day, it was your will. That was a lot of your doing as well, as far as getting up, getting back to that place. Uh, One thing that always stumped me, and I really wanted to ask your thinking on this, was you had a pride fight. You were killing it. Guy was getting beat up. You were about to win, but all of a sudden you started to see white, and it got to the point where they had to throw in the towel for you. You went to the hospital. They thought maybe it was something with your heart, but it turned out your heart was fine. Everything was fine. Your dad, a long time ago, and I don't know if it was back to the same situation where you punched the guy your ex-girlfriend was with, or if it was just the bar fight where they had to close down the bar, but he told you, Ken, you got to be careful. You're going to kill somebody one day. That's the only thing that came to my mind with that particular fight. I was wondering, did you ever think that? Like maybe that would have been the fight if God didn't blind me or something didn't happen physically. Have you ever had that thought, or do you think it was just, it is one of those situations in life where it happened and you move on?
I think that was, I wasn't living good. I was going through, divorce. I had kids dropped off on me. I had a 3-bedroom apartment where I had 2 fighters living with me. I was still trying to find my way because we were separated. And I remember she put herself, it was going to admit herself into a hospital, a psych hospital. And so I remember that she had brought the kids and they just showed up. And um, I had nowhere to put them. And I was 3 weeks, actually, no, it was 6 weeks out from a fight that I was getting ready to start training for and go into Japan. And it was just there. And they're my kids and they came first. And I had to figure it out. I remember bringing them in, and it was hard because I mean, basically sleeping on the floor. I mean, yeah, that was one of the worst moments because it was because I was unprepared for it. They're my kids, and I don't mind having them, but I did not have time to prepare for it. To go out and get another apartment or to do whatever I needed to do to make sure that they had places to stay. It was overnight. And so I went into that fight. I mean, I didn't train. I mean, I think I put a couple days into training, but nothing consistent. Um, I was stressed out because obviously not just with my kids I was worried, but I was also worried about her too, going into a psych ward. Like, what's going on? So there was a lot of stuff that was going on during that time that I just was not there. And I remember going into that fight and I just destroyed this guy, tried to put him away fast. No thought of what would happen if I didn't. I just like, I got to do this because I wasn't able to train for, so I'm going to go in. I'm just going to go after him. And you know, I don't think I've ever been in that because it was just like instant. Within 5 to 10 seconds, all of a sudden I was losing I've seen all these spots. I didn't get hit. I didn't do anything. I was literally beating, tar out of him. I felt pretty strong. I felt good. And I was angry, so I was able to vent all that. But, I don't know to this day. I said there was something. I remember when I got back, I did have some things that I had to do in order because my heart was out of rhythm. I had some stuff that I had to do to get it back into rhythm. What do they call those shock things? We go in, zap you or do whatever, and put it back in rhythm again. So there was that. I had those issues, but like I said, those were all personal things. I never brought it out because it's just an excuse. Bottom line is this: is that I did not prepare for that fight. I knew the fight was coming. I had plenty of opportunity to train for it. Those things in your life that happen, you have to make a choice whether or not you step up and be the father or you step up and be a fighter. I had to step up and be a father in that moment, and that's the reason I believe that those things in the ring happened to me, because I was not prepared for that fight, and I was out to going in and destroying the guy. But I didn't deserve to win because I didn't train for it.
This video is sponsored by Valor Bare Knuckle Boxing, Ken Shamrock's premier boxing league. Valor BK. No gloves, no cages, no clinches, no dirty boxing. Fast-paced fighting the way it was meant to be, by fighters, for fighters. Valor BK. Showing off the God-given talent of fighters all around. Valor BK. Check it out. You're the type of guy, fights are really quick now. Even in the street, the fights were quick. But you've done it literally all. And for like Hoist, you trained 3 hours. Hey, I got to be ready for a 3-hour fight. Give me fresh man every 15 minutes, To see that, like, even though you weren't prepared, you're still top of the game, top of the world. I want to hit, before we go to wrestling, that moment where you won the tournament. Eyes of the Beast tournament. This is the first time you actually get a title. This is the first time where you're actually given the validation of best in the world. Everybody knows it, but there's no moniker behind it. There's nothing else. Could you walk me back to that night? That is, to me, and I understand, having a Hall of Fame, having the acceptance of your peers after that, that is something like you're etched in history forever. But to gain that championship after all these years, not only not making it to the NFL, not only wrestling, but now you are the baddest man on the planet. Could you take us back to that and what it was like to finally have that in your hands?
Especially, like you said, the build up to that, being over there, being able to solidify my name over there, being the actual, basically the first foreigner to really be dominant in what we would call now the mixed martial arts, and to be able to do that tournament. Obviously, I'm I'm not certain, but I do believe that they had somebody they thought was going to be there, and I believe both guys that were supposed to be in the finals didn't make it, and that was, I believe, Suzuki and Minoru Suzuki. Um, as you've seen if you watch the tape, I remember that was my go-to move. Heel hook started to get more prevalent for me as I went on, but the side choke, the head and arm choke, was one that I really used quite a bit, because I felt I was big and strong, and if I could isolate one side, I could get that choke pretty easily. And I think with Funaki, I had tried it several times, trying to get him in the side choke. And I remember every time I would see how he would try to block it, and every time I would allow him to block it pretty easy, not real difficult. But when I did lock it, I remember the time I did lock it, and it was, if you saw, it was almost like there was no fight. It was almost like I slid into it. I wasn't struggling. It was like, because he was able to get out of it most of the other times. And I would allow that to happen until I sunk it in, until I realized when I had the right position, and I wouldn't struggle to get it. I just locked it in. And once I locked it in, he wasn't able to move the arm over the head again. And that's when he tried to just relax. And once I had him relax, I was thinking to myself, I got it. Like, and I didn't even know if it was working. I'm thinking to myself, he's just laying there. What's he doing? Like, I mean, I know that's what you got to just relax, let it be. I'm thinking to myself, man, maybe I should move positions. And then I just sunk it down, one hard squeeze, and all of a sudden he tapped it. If you seen, I jumped. I was like, yeah, because he was the one I believed that if I could beat, I could win the whole thing. And fortunately for me, I was able to get in there and do that, and then go on and win it. But it was, when you go through something like I did, going on to Japan and fighting and having the success, but there's no, like you said, nobody calls me champion. Nobody says you're the champion. So no matter how many fights you win, if there's nothing that says, hey, this guy is the champion, then you're just another fighter. But when he won that tournament, and it was the first one, that my name would be etched in that trophy and on that belt for as long as that league lasts. I was the first. That will never change. And so I remember when I won that, I was just so, I mean, even when I tried to do the acceptance speech, man, I was emotional because I realized in that moment when I was holding that trophy that this is forever. Like I'm the leader in this. I'm the first.
If I remember right, he's the one that trained you. So to be able to beat him, especially the first time, if you guys don't know the story, he went to Japan. Whoa, what an interesting situation that was when he first showed up. Got beat down. You didn't know. I also found it funny you didn't know how to tap. I have to break character. That befuddled
Right.
me to no end. But when I dissect what I've seen from tapes, because my jiu-jitsu teacher, Master Marcos, absolutely adores you, man. But he's really key on studying the movements, studying the placements, what a fighter might think, what a fighter could do, and to have gone from the student to the teacher, I would still say you hold him in high regard because with his teaching, you literally invented how to train for MMA. You produced all these champions out of Lions Den, and when I think like, who do we have on the pedestal of like these are the martial artists that we owe everything to? You're part of that. Who to you, along with him, would be martial artists that you give credit to, like, hey, because of you I'm a better fighter, other than him and Hoist Gracie? Who are some martial artists that you immensely respect that are in your league? And yes, they're in your league, okay?
There's a lot. Um, I if I was gonna look at something and really say, hey, all of us truly owe a thank you. Anybody that's involved in making a living at MMA, truly, I believe that we would have to go back to Art Davies, Horian Gracie, Campbell McLaren, Bob Meyerowitz. These, without that, man, without that vision, we don't have this. Like, we don't get this. And I think we truly overlooked that because of what UFC's been able to do with the Fertitas and them being able to take over with the connections that they've had and be able to bring it where it's at. Dana White being able to lead the ship into some tremendous growth. But I think we truly overlooked the true vision, the people who truly brought us this amazing sport, and unfortunately just didn't have the connections that Dana and the Fertitta brothers have to be able to bring it to where they needed to bring it. To me, I think that's the question that should be asked is, who do we owe this to? And I think because of the success of the UFC and what the Fertittas and Dana have been able to do, it's almost been overshadowed of the guys that fought early on that were fighting for $1,500 and $3,000 and then, 5,000 for the winner. Um, we overlook all that because we're seeing so much growth and where it's at right now. But if you're going to go back and you're going to really look at it and say, without this, I don't get to learn from great people like Funaki, like Gracie, you know, Don Fry was another one that I had much respect for. Mark Coleman, who came in and just started just dominating people, took the ground and pound to another level. You got, and then we go all the way up to the Conor McGregors who have bad attitudes but are tremendous fighters. I mean, there's just John Jones, um, who has come in and, you look at him, you think nothing of him, and then he goes in and just dominates the weight class. And again, there's all those faces that have come along the way to be able to bring it to where it is now. But if you want to go where the seed is planted, you got to go back to those guys, man. They really made this possible for all of us.
And it was for the love of the fighting. You and Mike Tyson had that conversation. It's like, why do we do this to ourselves? And you said something that just clicks so easily for me. It's because we're good at it. There's nothing like when you got a good one-on-one You guys are neck and neck, and it really shows who you are, who's going to come out on top. Wrestling, man, you dominate everything. You dominate everything with the WWF, TNA, NWA champion. It is something I truly love. Wrestling, professional wrestling doesn't get the love it deserves, and you stepped into it, and you went back for more. Not only did you do a training camp, and then you got paid to stretch guys out, but then you go and you continue. It's like, oh well, it didn't work out here. Let's go over here. And again, that's a testament to your dad saying like, hey, you know what? You should try this. I had no idea you and Dean Malenko were friends. That you guys knew each other, and to know the man of 1,000 holds. I'm thinking like you could have learned everything right then and there before going to Japan, and then you go to the Hart House, you go to the dungeon, and you train with Bret Hart, the excellence of execution, and you've had nothing but good things to say about wrestling. I want to know when you first caught the bug and what your first bump was like. My first bump almost knocked me out. I won't lie to you. It was a running bump. I knew what I was supposed to do. I didn't do it. I hit the ground, and now the guy who trained me is with WWE. He's like, you okay? I was like, yeah. He's like, you're not okay, but next time just stop. And I was like, okay. So tell me how you got the bug, because we know your dad watched it. You're like, but then once you started doing it, then you understood.
I went to Brett's, like you said, and I was working with them for a little bit too to get prepared. But I think it was probably after the Vader match that I realized that I could do this. I know when I refed Bret Hart Stone Cold, I had my doubts about what I was doing and whether I could do it. But after I was in there for a few minutes, I realized, like, man, I didn't know the difference. Like, these guys put on a great show. I was like, wow, this is good. I mean, I was right in it. And so that went real smooth for me. And then when I did the match with Vader, it was the same thing. I went in and had a match with Vader. Obviously, there was things that I needed to change because I was a little bit of probably stiff, which I didn't know at the time. But it was great. I was able to go with Vader because Vader was a tough dude, and that we could go ahead and go after one another and be okay with it. And so I remember after that, I had a pretty good understanding of what I needed to do, where I needed to improve. But the match was great. I think it set a tone for who I was. And I was able to really kind of let go a little bit. And Vader was able to let go a little bit. And we were able to put on that kind of match. But going forward, even like Brett said, he said, well, I couldn't do that with Shawn Michaels or Hunter, because they're not those kinds of wrestlers. They're not going to take those kinds of shots. So in order for me to be able to be at that level, to be able to work with anyone, I had to work at it. I had to go in and really start learning how to do these moves that I do, to be able to do it in a way where it's not hurting anybody, or that it's not feeling like they're getting hit. Even though with me, when I would spar, that was like for me doing pro wrestling, but for them it would be like fighting. So I had to learn how to balance those punching, those knees, the throws, the submissions to where they were light and they weren't hitting anyone, because sparring to me was normal, but sparring to them wasn't. So hitting them with the sparring punch would feel like I was trying to knock them out. So I had to adjust from the Vader match to be able to lighten it up, half of what I was doing in there, just go half of that. And I was able to do that through my career. I was able to really figure it out and be able to really understand how not to get people hurt and still be aggressive and still do the things that I do.
Did you find the psychology difficult to master when you first started? I think when I first refed, I had one of the greatest matches I've ever seen in person, these two indie guys. And there were certain mistakes, very minor, that were brought to my attention. Like, yo, bro, you killed the crowd. Why did you do this? I'm like, no one told me. So here I see the WrestleMania 13 match. You're still killing it. Was there any aspects of the psychology that, hey, Shamrock, you really got to get this, like right now, that somebody came up to, kind of like when JR called you out when you were partying a little too much? And listen, I've had a conversation with JR. He gave me a cold shoulder, and that hurt. It wasn't even more than a sentence. So I can only imagine him laying into you. So how was the psychology aspect for you?
For me, it was pretty simple because they weren't asking me to be a character. They were asking me to be me. And so when I went into the match, it was the same thing. They said, "Listen, just be you. You know, if you were in there and you were reffing a MMA match, do the same thing. Do be the same thing you would if you were in there reffing one of these matches." And I remember kind of like in my side going, "Okay," but in my mind, I was like, "I don't know how to fake someone getting punched or someone doing this because I mean, when I do it, it's real, so I know it is." So there was that thought when I went in on that match. But after I was in there for a little bit, um, I didn't. I had no. It was like it was easy because I was doing what I had already been doing for a few years. You know, being able to go and watch guys fight one another, put them in submissions. It was like that when I was watching these guys go. So it wasn't like they were going in and saying, "Listen, we need you to do this, and then you got to do this kind of thing." It was like just be you, and I did, and it worked out, and that's all I've ever done. I never played the character. I always played me, and it worked out.
For when you actually got into the business, you already were at grandiose venues for fighting, and you had opportunity to work at Madison Square Garden. You said that was hallowed ground. That was one of your favorite places to fight. I was curious, as a fighter and as a wrestler, if you had to pick, which one did you get the bigger pop out of the crowd for? Was it fighting or was it wrestling?
Wow. You know, the that that's hard because there was two events, one in MMA and one in pro wrestling that you couldn't tell because they were so loud that your skin was rumbling, like you could feel the vibration from the crowd. And that was the one with Bret Hart, the Canadian Stampede, with the I guess it was 4-man tag or something. It just went off, and it was the loudest I've ever heard an arena. But then I turn around and I go back to, I believe it was UFC 40, me and Tito Ortiz the first time. When they introduced me, I got this pop, and I was like thinking to myself, Tito who? Tito who? But then when they introduced Tito, they popped just as loud. And I was like, what side are these guys on? It was so loud the time they introduced me and when they introduced him that it was so loud that there's no way that these fans were booing either one of us. They had to be cheering for both of us because it was so loud, man. My skin was rumbling. That's the loudest I've heard. I've been in front of 120,000 people at the Tokyo Dome. Of course, Japan is a little bit different. And I've been in front of 17,000 people, 20, 30,000 people, and they've been loud. Even Madison Square Garden, it's been loud. But boy, those two nights were special because not just of the impact and of where we were at in MMA at the time, and then where we were at with the U.S. and Canada at the time. It was special, and the crowd was just enormous. And I don't think that you could ever get a crowd louder than those two that I heard.
Because I'm out of New Jersey, I'm in the Philadelphia area. This is my home. I always ask my guests, do you have any memories in this area? Any specific shows? I believe you were at WrestleMania 15 when it was Rock and Austin and the Brawl for All, Butter being KO'd my man Bart. So, was there any memories you have from these areas that still reside within you that were special to you, or you just remember Road Dogg being funny?
No, my memories are, the things that some were good, some were bad. That will stick for you, like Owen Hart falling from the rafters. I was on deck at the time when it happened. So that's, that was tragic. No one believed it was real when he was being rolled out. Everybody thought it was a gimmick or a work. That was sad in itself because for a long time the fans didn't believe it. And they were all waiting for it. Oh, he's back, but it didn't. Obviously, we know it was real. You know, there was a lot of guys that passed away, during those times too. Those are things that you remember. But I think the things I will take from there that are special are the road trips, being able to be with Road Dogg Billy Gunn traveling, Steve Blackman, myself, we traveled together for a while. Had some great moments with those guys. Um, Made some great friends during that time. JR, who was a great mentor for me, even in times where I felt like, I just want to go out and have fun. He was like, hey, you need to reel it in. Being able to have that talk and be able to have that friendship with him at the time was awesome. Even with Stone Cold and The Rock, being able to work with those guys and being able to have a relationship with them was awesome, getting to know them. And so, again, like I said, there was a lot of relationships that I was able to build. But the thing in life that, and maybe I don't handle it properly. I don't know if it's right or wrong. But for me, it seems like life, you have to constantly keep moving forward. And you got to keep moving forward, and you got to keep looking for other opportunities and to keep growing and being better, building a business, being able to build yourself in a better position. And so when I left WWF, obviously I didn't have those ties because I'm not with them every day anymore. And so those things get left behind, and then you start creating new memories, new opportunities. But you still have those people, I would hope, as friends, even though you don't talk every day, even though you're not around them anymore. Those memories and those times are still special and still memorable, and that will be friends forever. But for me, it's now moving forward. Like for Valor, what I'm doing with Valor now with our fight company, my focus is just that. Everything that I think and do right now is to figure out how I make it better. How do we build this and make this thing better than what we're seeing out there right now? I have always told myself, if I had the opportunity to be able to go in and be a promoter or do a fight and own my own business, what would I do to make it better? And that's literally my mindset, like having no ropes, no cages, having the bout circle where it's sent down a little bit visually for the fans. It's awesome. For the fighters, it makes it faster. There's nothing for them to lay on or use as a weapon to be able to spin out. They have to use their footwork. So for me, really, that's kind of where my thought has gone now. It's not, I guess, hanging on to the memories of the past. Obviously, those will always be with me, but now it's more about moving into the future and what it is I could do to be able to build something that I helped create, that I helped build for fans out there to love and enjoy. How can I make something better? How can I build it and make it better?
And speaking of Valor BK, now that's where we're going next. I thoroughly enjoyed the concept. Watching the fights, seeing everything you just described, how the fans get a better view, no cage. I'm a person that I've gone to over 100 concerts. I love going to see different people perform, whether it's fighting or music or etc. And to be able to, no matter where you are, there's nothing hindering that eyesight between the individuals that have the limelight. That's really important. When I listen to you speaking about Valor, these are the God given talents these guys had. How much emphasis did you pull from the original fighting, the street fighting that you had, the the competitions? I'm not gonna say the actual words, but it's like, hey, you come down here, put 500 down, and see if you can keep your money and make a little extra. How much of the aspect did you take from it when saying, okay, here are the rules, here are what we're gonna focus on when it comes to it? Because being able to say, hey, listen, mano a mano, no gloves, old school, it's very invigorating to a young man. It's like, yo, I'm gonna show who I am today.
I started doing this because I wanted to, and I've told myself, like, if I was going to have it be in there and own my own business and build a fight league, with my experience, I want to be able to take that experience and be able to put it into something that I would build along with my other business partners that are involved with me. They have ideas and thoughts themselves. But because of the experience that I've had in the ring and out of the ring for this many years to understand what it is that works and doesn't work, for a long time, we've been told that putting a glove on somebody is making it safer. And that's not true. We're finding out now that that's not true. That the reason why they put a glove on fighters is to protect the hand, not the head. And a lot of that has to do with if a guy goes in and fights, just like within boxing, these champions would go in, they'd fight, they would hit somebody and they would break their hand, and then they can't defend themselves. They can't go in and defend the title in a couple months. They're out for a while. So they come up with boxing gloves. So now they can able to hit somebody in the head as many times as they want, and they can come back and defend their title. Well, when you got into the MMA, it was a little bit even more faster too, because now you're fighting 3 or 4 times in one night. So guys were damaging their hands in their first fight. Then they still had 2 more fights to go. Some guys would go with broken hands, some guys wouldn't. So what did they do? They went out and said, let's put gloves on guys and make it safer. No, let's put gloves on guys so they can come back and defend their title. They can fight again that same night. So we've been fed this for a century of this glove being safe. And as we're starting to find out, and I've been saying this for 15 years, that I don't like the glove in MMA. Because now you're basically boxing. It's got some pad on there, but still the same concept. You're still being able to hit anybody a whole bunch of times without hurting your hand. So it causes brain damage. Now you take the glove and you make it smaller, 4 ounces, and put tape underneath it and say it's safer. Frustrating. Me as a fighter understand it's not. So this is why Valor is happening, because I love it and I help build it. And if I'm going to put something out there for fans to watch, I want to be true to myself, and I want to be true to the fighters, and I want to be true to the fans. And I want to put something out there that I can be proud of, and that my business partners can be proud of, and that we don't got to turn around and look at ourselves in the mirror and go, well, is this safer or is it not? Kind of like slap boxing. Hey, let's just stand there and let somebody hit you. Please stop. Let's be safe as much as we can when we're talking about combat. Don't make it worse, make it better. And so by taking gloves off, you're now saying to fighters, you got to be more accurate with your strikes. And you can't punch as hard, because if you miss your target, which is very easy to do, you will break your hand. But if you're being more accurate with your punches and trying to land your target without power, if you miss, you won't break your hand. And so for me, it's common sense when you talk about what we know about fighting now, in gloves and no gloves, that we come out and try to do something that I feel is more exciting, it's faster, and in my opinion, when it comes to brain damage and some of the facts that we have that we know now, you take less damage on the brain over a period of time because of the less punches. So I'm excited about it. I know January 7th, we got a watch party. And it's on the Valor app, that's what it's called, Valor. So if you want to go check out our app, go check it out on Valor. That's where we're going to have the launch party January 7th. We're going to make our announcements because we got events coming up. We're also going to be having fights streamed through our app, on the Valor app. And I would be very remiss not to mention some of these guys that really, and there's a lot of people involved, but some of the guys that really helped me get to where we're at today. One of the guys is Nick. He does our productions. He's out of Florida. All the stuff you'll see on there, he's the one that pieces it together. I got Alex Houlihan and Alex Nace. Both those guys are involved in the crypto world, the connections that we have there. We're literally making NFTs that will be relative to Valor. So we look forward to those. Those guys will be doing that. Plus, they have a lot of connections in the fight world and the entertainment world. So those guys have been tremendous for us. Steve and Andy, Steve is our tech guy who does a lot of the tech. Andy does all our marketing, which I look forward to seeing that. And then there's Todd, who's been involved with the Lions Den since Jerry Bolander. He trained under Jerry in Napa at their gym there. And then Maddie Miranda, who's actually my business partner along with these other guys, but Maddie's a majority with me. Right in the beginning, when I introduced this to him, man, he just said, man, this is lightning in a bottle. He saw it. He saw what I saw. And of course, he's the one that's come in and really put all this business together. He's one that's really building this thing to where it needs to go. Obviously, it's the vision I came up with, but you got to have people around you that are going to be able to put this in front of people. And Maddie's one of those guys that's helping me do that right now. Um, Ted is Ted K, who is my manager, but he was in the music business and he's got a lot of connections. But he's been really tremendous in really being able to help bring all these people, all these pieces together, and being able to really help this thing move forward, and being able to help me stay connected, uh, to be able to manage all of these things that are happening all at the same time. So just want to give a shout out to those guys. But January 7th, man, we're doing the launch party. You don't miss it. All of our announcements are coming up there.
And man, you're plugging everything I wrote down. That got the whole team: Maddie, Marin, Ted, Alex, Todd, Steve, and Andy.
Yeah.
So with the knowledge that you have, one thing I just out of sheer curiosity is I know how the wrestling card works. You know, the higher up you are on the card, the more people want to come to see you, the more you get paid on the card. And that kind of works the same for fight cards as well. You know, the higher up the bill you are, the more money you make. Having discussions with George Clinton's lawyer. This is music now. I'm just looking at the contracts between the traveling and the touring, and I'm looking at this. I'm like, this is monotonous. This is ridiculous for both parties. For the whoever he's traveling with, himself. I was wondering when it came to helping the fighters keep their money. I know you mentioned the NFT. That's supposed to help the fighters, increase not only their visibility, but hey, when you make the money, this is your money. You're going to distribute it how you wish. What were some other key factors other than the protection and the coin, the Doge, not the Dogecoin, I'm sorry, the cryptocurrency that you had in mind when it came to giving the fighters benefits for fighting for you?
What we wanted to do was really give it another avenue for these guys to make money, like being able to go out and promote their own coin, like they're being a part of this and being able to incentivize them to get other people involved. But since then, we've moved away from that and would move more towards the NFT market. We feel like it's more of a fit for the sports world to be able to do NFTs. It seems to be a lot easier to put those two together. So we've really made a full transition from that world into the NFTs, from the coin, and I look forward to that too because I think that also gives fighters a way to make money even long after they're done fighting.
With the tournament format, I know you love the tournament. I love the tournament. I had the greatest fighting win out of a tournament, and it was like my ticket to the Junior Olympics. I'm still a kid at this point, but I remember after so many times, like I was a bigger kid, so they would just give me the gold. I finally had my opportunity to earn it, and do it. Did I earn it? But the tournament format really puts on the pressure. Are you ready to not only be mentally prepared, but did you do the training? Can you do the endurance? Are you quick enough to realize what this fighter does and study him within a couple of seconds? Is that how Valor's going to do it? Is it going to be a single match card? This guy's fighting this guy's fighting that guy? Or are you going to have tournaments as well? Because I know you have the content houses where you have fighters coming in, providing content. It's like, hey, if you want to fight, this is your opportunity to get on the grand stage.
Show me, yes, yeah. The tournament's tough. I love it, but it's hard to get any states to sanction tournaments. They committee, the athletic commission, they don't like those tournaments. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. So what we might do, we've got a lot of options that we're thinking about because we do like the tournament because we want people to be able to earn those belts if we put them on them, not just one fight. So what we might do is like do a tournament over a 6 month time period where we have a weight division and we're going to focus on that weight division. In 6 months, we're going to crown a champion. So everybody would fight every other month until we get that champion. And then, of course, underneath those fights, then we would be having other fights, obviously, because we want to make sure that we, as a fight card for people to watch, we want to make sure that we have a variable of weight classes. But I think over a few times, 6 months or so, we would do a tournament to be able to crown whatever weight division we're doing at that time. But like you said, our content house right now is our focus. We want to start that first. And because we believe that would give us great advertisements and be able to find good fighters to be able to compete on our main card when we do our main card. So that's kind of where our focus is right now. Whereas that we've got some other things that we're looking into to see how we can actually move in being able to do that next big event. Because what we don't want to do is just come out and just market a big event. We want to be able to give people more, to be able to digest more, and then give them the big fight.
Thinking about the business aspect versus the fighting aspect, especially since you've been on both sides. Now that you're, hey, I'm sending on this next generation. What would be the biggest type of event you would like to achieve? You know, WWE's got WrestleMania. You got Wrestle Kingdom for New Japan. You got UFC. UFC somehow has marketed every pay per view to be the biggest and baddest. I give them so much credit for that. But at the end of the day, what type of card would be your ideal card for Valor? And what venue would you like it to take place at?
I think that um, venues are it's difficult because, like I said, Madison Square Garden comes to mind. I remember in Dallas was a great place we went to. Japan, Tokyo Dome. I fought in all the big ones, right? And they're awesome. Um, for me, I just kind of want to look to the future. I want to obviously venues is something that I think should be a part of it, but I don't necessarily believe that there's one that would be the best, at least in my mind yet. As we move on, we might see one that goes, okay, this is it. This is what we want to do. But for me, I think it's more about capturing our platforms, social media platforms. It's more about being able to give people entertainment through their phone. Um, how we do that, I don't know yet. I know we got a lot of great people working for us that will figure it out. But for me, how long is that going to last where people actually go and spend money to go to an event and sit in an arena and watch a fight as opposed to taking this thing here, clicking it on and watching it on their phone with their friends? I don't know, right? These are all things that we have to think about as business people. What is our next move? Like, where do we go? Obviously, we're not where we want to have the big events because we love the live audience and the crowd. But we also understand that we're in a tech world and that everybody does stuff and business on their phones. So we got to make sure we're paying attention to everything that's going on and all opportunities. And at this point in time, we have a direction and a place we're going. But obviously, these are things that we're keeping close to our chest and that we can move forward with. But I believe that the people that are involved with Valor, that are moving this tech stuff forward and building these different things for us, we're going to be trendsetters. We're going to be the ones doing it first.
And the one thing I really want to drive home to the audience is during the pandemic, Valor is so good at providing content. I that's my job. I have to be on my phone. I have to see what's happening, and every couple of seconds, we're talking every week, Valor's dropping something. Hey, check this out. Ken Shamrock's doing this. They would drop a vignette of him talking about Valor, why it's important. And his own social media does that too. Sign up for his newsletter, guys. I'm telling you, sign up. The man is probably the most reachable all-star celebrity you will ever get in contact with. He gets your questions, he answers them, but just to be able to send it and somebody actually look at it, not just send it and then maybe somebody will look at it. No, it'll get sent, you'll get a response, and then you go from there. It's pretty awesome. You know, with everything you've done a lot of bodyguarding. You've bodyguarded for 50 Cent, some celebrities, you helped fans, you've trained champions, but a lot of people overlook your work with the military and what you've done with them. What are some of the moments working with the military, training military vets that you have that you recall? How did you fall into that, and why do you have a heart for our vets that sacrifice so much that people really can't understand?
I'm a realist. Um, when I look at something, I see what it is like. And when you look at NFL players and you look at NBA players, you look at it and you go, man, it's impressive. Like these guys are legit. This is tremendous athletic ability. Baseball, guy throwing a baseball, curveball, hitting one out of the park, hitting something like that, coming from a pitcher that's, at that level. It's incredible. The odds of being able to hit a ball when someone's trying to strike you out and you got a little bat. You look at all these things in sports. I look at them and I just see how hard it is to do, but how easy they make it look. You look at the military. We look at people and we see the surface of what these guys are doing. Like, oh, they're going in there, and people, one side or the other, some people going, man, they're in there and they're out there every day and they're defending our country and they're putting their lives on the line. And other people go, they're out there killing people. You got two sides to it, right? People look at it, but they're not really seeing these guys on who they are, who they truly are. They're you and me. They have a heartbeat. They got blood. They got a brain. And they join the military probably not for the cause to be a hero or to go in there and protect our country. Maybe some of them, but majority of them go in there because it's a job or it's something to do or because they got nothing else. But once they go through boot camp and once they get into the military and then they start doing their jobs, they start doing it for one another. It's a team. And they go in there and they realize that the only way they get out of these things and come back home alive is if they're both doing their job. Everybody does their job for each other. And while they're doing that job, they also understand that their lives are being put on the line and that they got to do this every single day. And they're you and me. Only thing is they chose a different path. But that path they chose helps us who are sitting at home, to be able to do what you and me are doing right now and have freedom of speech, be able to talk about things, be able to sit in our warm house, not being able to have people come in and take what we own. This is what they are doing. Whether they do it intentionally or not, they're still doing it. And we need to understand that they are us. Whether they have a Republican, Democrat, individual, whatever, put all of that aside, they're us going out and putting their lives on the line so that we have all of these things that we have. Now, whether they go intentionally doing that doesn't matter. Fact is, remains they're you and me with a heartbeat and a brain, putting themselves out in front of gunfire or in front of bombs and tanks and doing things that we obviously aren't doing and probably some of us don't want to do. Anybody that wants to do that, literally that have been in it, probably got a screw loose because no one wants to be out there in front of gunfire. It's just not normal. So I just look at it like that. Let's not look at it as a military. Let's not look at it as people going out there and doing whatever. Let's look at it as they were just you and me, and they were doing a job that they signed up to do to be able to protect America. Period. Don't get political. Don't dig in between the lines. Just look at it as what it is.
You've had so many fan interactions, and too numerous to go like what was the one that you remember the most or etc. But there is always one, kind of like when Jesus was chilling and the Samaritan woman came up. She's like, "Could you please help us out?" And he's like, "Oh, what am I supposed to do? Juice first?" And she goes, "Yes, but even we can get a little." And he marveled at her faith, like, "Oh, you know what? That's you got me there. Go ahead. Let it happen." There's always an interaction. There's always a moment where somebody says something to you, whether it's like, "Oh, you changed my life," or "Hey, man, good job," and you never expected that from them. Something that catches you off guard. Do any of those moments ring a bell immediately? Can you remember a time where somebody said like "thank you" or said "good job" and you kind of like, "Whoa, okay"?
Yeah, I've had several because I've done a lot of things where I've reached out and I've visited kids, make a wish programs, and things like that. And I think the ones that stick out to me, and there's several of them where kids are dying. That's just the end result. And the things that they say that you just like you don't realize it as a celebrity or as a person that people look at. Sometimes you don't understand the impact that you have on people. Sometimes it's their dying wish. And that's where I have been, where kids have literally, their wish was to be able to watch me fight or to be able to meet me. And when you think about that, I mean, think about that for a moment. That's their dying wish. It's like, how am I worthy of that? Like, how am I worthy of that? I know who I am. I'm not a perfect guy. How am I worthy of this? Somebody wanting a dying wish. And I think that that's where I think a lot of us truly have to understand that we make a difference and we can change people's lives and we can literally make someone so happy that that's what they're going to remember when they do pass. And so those are things that stick out to me, like I said, that I've had the privilege and the honor of being a part of. I was at the fourth floor in Quantico at the Marine Corps when I was teaching brass there, and there was a hospital, and I went on the fourth floor. I think it's the fourth floor, where they have these vets that come home and they've been blown up or shot or critical condition, and they're on this floor, and no press or anybody can go up there, but I was able to go up and meet and greet some of these soldiers, and the reason why I've and this is not because I was doing it before this, but it gave me more of a determination to at least do more for military and always promote military and speak highly of them. It's because when I walked into this thing, it was a site that you just you don't want to be around, right? I mean, it's just not fun. These guys, some of them are got no legs, some of them have got one arm. They're alive, and some of them are in a bad way. Some of them are starting to feel positive, but I got to meet some of them. And, you know, the, this is where I wish that people who are angry at the military or defund the police or defund the military that have stances like that, that would get a talk with some of these guys to understand what it is they're doing, right? And how they feel. Not all of them, but most of them. The first thing that came to their minds was they felt like they were letting their men down. I'm like, what do you mean? Like you're in a hospital, you can't do anything. But they feel like because they got hurt, because they've lost a leg or two legs, and they can't be out there side by side doing their job with their brothers or sisters. And their first thought is they feel like they're letting them down. And I just think to myself, the courage and the determination to want to be there for one another was just unbelievable. And after going through all that, that's not thinking about all this other, they're thinking about not being there. And that resonated with me, along like we've been making a wish. The other thing is it's just special, right? But to understand that their dedication to their duty and to be there and make sure that they're protecting their brothers and sisters and that they're not there and they feel like they're letting them down was that stuck with me, because that to me just told me that even though we see on the surface what these some of these guys act like, they're hard, they're tough, they probably, some of them are vocabulary is not very good, but if you can just get away and dig through all of that, you'll see the honor and the courage, the dedication that they have to do their job and to be able to be there for one another. To me, that's stuck with me.
Being a brat myself, I resonated with everything you just said. That is spot on, nail on the head. I always ask the most important question last. What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given that readily comes to mind? Again, so much that you've been given, so much you've learned. Man, it could be how to do a proper heel hook, a halo. Man, it's truly, truly amazing. But there's always something somebody said, and sometimes it's funny. It's like, hey, don't buy the tour bus, rent one. Sometimes it's simple, just live. Sometimes it's very long. But somebody tells you something, and you hear it, and you go, okay, and you latch on to it. What's something that you remember in the moment like that?
I think that the the one, and again, I've had a lot of them, so I get asked sometimes, and I'll come up with different ones depending on what mindset I'm in. But I've been very fortunate to be able to have a lot of people speak into my life, be able to speak over me and talk to me, and of course the father I had, who in himself had a lot of things to work with that many kids, to be able to help them, motivate them, and to be able to direct them and going in the right directions. Um, I would have to probably say the one that sticks with me is that, and it's so many words. It was more of a sense of, you know, and it's not complicated. I think it gets as simple as it can be, and it's, when you get knocked down, no matter what it is, knocked down, knocked out, whatever hurdles, however you want to put it, whatever it affects in your life, um, it's what you do when you get up, because you have to get up. Because if you stay down, nothing's ever going to improve, right? So I've always taken that in a sense in life is like, when you get knocked down, and you will, everybody does. What is it you do when you get up? What's your, and I hear this all the time. When you get knocked down, you got to get back up. Okay, that's cool. But what's next? So there's more to it than just getting knocked down and getting back up. It's what do you do when you get knocked down and you get back up? Because there is no if you get back up. What do you do when you get back up? When you get knocked down, you get back up. You put one foot in front of the other. And as you move forward, you figure it out, because nobody's going to be able to know everything all the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, truly an epic conversation with legend and so many accolades, it's mind-boggling. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Godfather of MMA, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Guys, I'm telling you, go to Valor BK right now. They're on Instagram. Check out kenshamrock.com, ValorBK.com. They're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Ken Shamrock Official. Remember that as well. A special thank you to Maddie, Marin, Ted, Alex, Nick, Steve, Andy, and Todd for helping me set this up. And most importantly, Mr. Shamrock, sir. I'm going to call you Master Shamrock since you're so integral to my martial arts. Thank you for your time, sir.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
And everybody, remember, January 7th, check out Valor BK. As soon as this drops, I'm going to be there watching. You should be there with me. But in the meantime, be smart, be mindful, rock on, and God bless, guys. Ninja out.
Woo, baby, you listen to John the Ninja. Oh, your ears are about to go on a vacation. John the Ninja's got what you need.